Hey guys, this is God of Politics, and we'll go back to a brand new video, but before we get started with this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But in today's video, I'm doing another hypothetical election prediction video, and this is quite an interesting one to say the least. It's between Larry Hogan and John Bel Edwards. Now, John Bel Edwards, if you don't know, is the Democratic governor from Louisiana. That's right, Louisiana, the great blue state of Louisiana. No, I'm just kidding. Louisiana is a very red state, and Larry Hogan's the governor from a very blue state, being the state of Maryland. Larry Hogan was first elected in 2014, and he won pretty easily. And then in 2018, he won by an even, way more expansive margin. In 2013, 2015, John Bel Edwards was first elected as governor of Louisiana by quite a large margin. He won by much less in 2019, but he still did win, even with involvement from Trump and other Republican Party officials. They still were not able to knock off John Bel Edwards, and he was able to win quite a red state, a state that Trump won by 16 percentage points. Larry Hogan won a state that Biden won by 33 percentage points. So they are both governors in states where the other party at the presidential level wins by a lot, but they've still been able to win. So what would happen if they made it to the presidential race? Now, this is not going to ever happen. Larry Hogan would never win a Republican primary, especially considering he's pro-life, much more moderate. And John Bel Edwards would never win the Democratic primary. He is pro-life, and he is quite fiscally conservative, quite socially conservative. He's just generally conservative all around. Think of Joe Manchin, but even more conservative than that. And so that's what John Bel Edwards is. You could even argue he's to the right of Larry Hogan on a number of issues, abortion and, many issues like that. So what would happen if they were to go up in an election? Now, I haven't put anybody as a VP candidate because, again, I'm not going to worry about who they would pick because this is an election that would never actually happen, but this is just completely hypothetical. So starting off with these safe states, I believe that would include Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma. Actually, I'll take Kansas. I'll take Kansas out of it. Missouri, Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and that actually might be all of the safe states. Of course, Nebraska at large. Nebraska's first and Nebraska's third because, this is not the conventional kind of election we're looking at, so the safe states are kind of off. But for the safe states for the Republican Party or for John Bel Edwards for the Democratic Party, it would be Washington, California, Hawaii, as well as Illinois, New York, Vermont, Maine's 1st District, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey. Maryland would still be a safe state because if we're looking at this, Larry Hogan would certainly do much better in the state of Maryland. He would certainly do much better in the region, but federal politics and state politics are very, very different. You can see, Steve Bullock running for Senate and losing by a big margin, Phil Bredesen running for Senate and losing by a big margin. It just is not the same. Al Gore running for president and losing his home state of Tennessee that he won by 30 points 10 years prior. So things are certainly very different at the state and federal level, and so Larry Hogan would still lose the state of Maryland. I could see going down to a likely margin, but he still would lose it, as well as D.C. would go down to a likely margin. And so that is actually all of these safe states. John Bel Edwards getting to 173, Larry Hogan getting to 108 or to just 85. Normally I'm used to saying a number in the hundreds, but we're only at 85 safe electoral votes here. Now the likely margin states would include both Louisiana and Mississippi. John Bel Edwards would make the state of Louisiana closer, but he's not going to win it, just like Larry Hogan's not going to win Maryland. John Bel Edwards would do better overall in the rural areas in the South, but the problem is that most of the southern states are very heavily Republican, with the exception of Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, and Texas. But you've got, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia. All of those states are safe states. South Carolina, but in this scenario, they're all going by likely margins because John Bel Edwards, I think, would do better with black voters. Not better than someone like Obama, of course, but I think he would do good with black voters because he was elected in a large part because of black voters propelling him to victory in states like in areas like Baton Rouge, New Orleans. And that would have helped him. I think he would have done better with those voters in states like Mississippi and states like South Carolina, and that would have given him a boost, and I think he would have brought the margins in those states down to a likely margin, as well as, actually, I probably should have put Indiana as a safe state, as well. So Larry Hogan actually has a 96 safe electoral votes. Alaska is also going to be a likely margin. Alaska is a state where it's kind of hard to tell what would happen, because overall I think what we would see is John Bel Edwards would do better in rural areas compared to Joe Biden, and Larry Hogan would do better in suburban areas compared to Donald Trump. But, Alaska is one of those weird states where Democrats actually do quite well in the rural areas and worse in the more urban suburban areas, and so I think Larry Hogan would have won the state, but the dynamics of this area are quite different. Montana would also have been a state that went by a likely margin. I think John Bel Edwards would have done better in the rural areas and some of those small town areas. I think he would have gotten good margins out of those areas, but you really would have seen, I think you could see quite low turnout in this election, because you're going to have the progressive base of the Democratic Party that really would not like John Bel Edwards, and you're going to have a lot of the Trump wing of the party in the Republican Party that really does not like Larry Hogan. So you're going to have a lot of people that don't turn out to vote here, but other people that do turn out, I think we're going to see margins similar to this. So getting to the likely margin states now, Oregon would be a likely margin state. I think you just wouldn't get the same margins that Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton got in areas like Portland. And while he would do better in the rural areas, they don't really make up much of the state. It really comes down to that Portland area. I honestly think that the Rust Belt would probably be a likely margin, to be honest. Not because John Bel Edwards is the best candidate for this area, but because Larry Hogan is just such a bad candidate for this area. I'd even put Pennsylvania. Actually, I won't put Pennsylvania in a likely margin. But these three states, I definitely would put these states in likely margins, because John Bel Edwards would have more appeal to rural areas. I think a lot of these people out in rural areas, one of the, couple of the key issues they care about is guns and abortion, and John Bel Edwards is actually pro-life and pro-gun. Larry Hogan is not pro-life. He has, made pro-life comments in the past, but generally he's been in favor of keeping abortion legal and has not made any attempts to alter that in the state of Maryland. So, of course, that's due to the partisanship in Maryland, but also due to his personal opinions. I think that would have enabled John Bel Edwards to get much better margins in the rural areas, as well as not doing too poorly in the suburban areas. And sure, in states like Minnesota, that makes a big difference, but, when Republicans don't really have any solid base of support because you're doing better in the rural areas, it's going to be difficult to win a state like Minnesota. Maine at large, I also think, would go by a likely margin, and Maine second, we'll talk about that in a second, but Maine at large, I think, would go by a likely margin, because it's hard to tell how much appeal John Bel Edwards would have to rural areas in the Northeast, because these areas are generally more socially liberal than areas in the South, areas in the Midwest. And so, would John Bel Edwards being pro-life actually hurt him? Well, I think it would with some voters, but generally I think he would still be able to do better. Delaware, I also think, would go by a likely margin, just because it's near Maryland, and it was closer, much closer than Maryland was in 2016 and 2020. And so I think that it would have gone by a likely margin there. Now, getting into the lean margin states, I think first would have been Texas. It's really hard to tell what would have happened here, because I think Larry Hogan would have done much better in the suburbs, but John Bel Edwards would have gotten better margins in the rural areas, and it really would have been interesting to see what happened to the Rio Grande Valley, because I can't see Larry Hogan having much appeal to Latino voters, but I can't see having John Bel Edwards, I can't see him having much appeal to Latino voters either. So it really would have been interesting to see what would have happened. Probably you would have seen a very low turnout scenario here, but I think that Larry Hogan getting better numbers in the suburbs certainly would have helped him, but they're not getting that rural base of support, which does make up a substantial portion of the state. It's not a huge portion, but it's substantial, and I think that would have limited the numbers for Larry Hogan. Arizona, I also think, would have got my lean margin because of Larry Hogan doing better in suburban Phoenix area. That's really the main reason why Republicans did lose the state, is because they got worse margins in the suburban areas of Phoenix. Now, Nebraska's 2nd district, I also think, would have gone by lean margin. It is mostly suburban, and I think Larry Hogan would have done better there. Maine's 2nd district, I also think, would have gone by lean margin, because Larry Hogan would have had less appeal to the rural areas, but I think John Bel Edwards would also have less appeal to the rural areas than he would in some other rural areas in other parts of the country. And that's probably all of the lean margin states for the Republicans. Now for the Democrats, I think Nevada actually probably would have gone by a lean margin. There are a lot of non-college educated voters here, but I think that actually I'll put it at a tilt margin. I'll put it at a tilt margin because it really would be hard to tell what would happen here, because a lot of the support the Democrats get would come from Latino voters, and I think that you'd see lower turnout amongst that group. But, the suburbs are not necessarily a large group of college-educated voters. If you look at the statistics for Nevada, you've got a lot of non-college educated voters, which were, have been swinging Republican. Larry Hogan, I think, would have less appeal to those voters. John Bel Edwards maybe does a little bit better in those rural areas, but I think that Larry Hogan would have pulled out a victory here. As for the lean margins for the Democrats for John Bel Edwards, I think Colorado would have been a lean margin. New Mexico would have been a lean margin, because Larry Hogan certainly would have performed better with non-college or with white college-educated voters, but John Bel Edwards would not have done too much worse with them overall in terms of how it impacted the overall margin of the state, and he would have done better in rural areas, and as well as Georgia, I think, would have gone by a lean margin. John Bel Edwards would have done much better in rural areas. This is all compared to Biden, not, them winning the rural areas. John Bel Edwards would not win rural areas. It's about how he does compared to someone like Biden. But again, Larry Hogan would do better in the suburbs. I also think North Carolina would probably go by a lean margin as well, because if you look at the performance of Barack Obama back in 2008, he got a lot of good margins in the rural areas, and he did end up winning the state. And I think John Bel Edwards, you'd see a similar thing. Now, Pennsylvania, I think, would also go by a lean margin. I think there would be more appeal here for Larry Hogan because he is in a neighboring state, but regardless, the rural areas, there'd be much less appeal that Republican voters would have, or that there would be for Republican voters if Larry Hogan was the nominee. And that's probably all the lean margin states. Now we can see John Bel Edwards is already up to 286 electoral votes here. And I can say that all four of these states would go by tilt margins to John Bel Edwards. Some of you saying, Virginia would go to Larry Hogan. I honestly don't necessarily buy that. What's the state I'm forgetting? New Hampshire. I think it also would have gone by tilt margin as well. If we start talking about Virginia, Virginia is a state where Larry Hogan would have done so much better in the Nova area. But John Bel Edwards would do better in southwestern Virginia. He would do, I think, well in areas like Virginia Beach, areas like Charlottesville. And I think, Larry Hogan would make it very, very close, but I don't think that he would end up winning it. Ohio and Iowa, you'd see a similar scenario to what you'd see in the Rust Belt area, and John Bel Edwards would have much more appeal to the rural areas. Larry Hogan would really struggle to get the support anywhere near what Trump got. And in Florida, I think Larry Hogan would lack the appeal that Trump got in this election. I think he'd do much worse on the Panhandle, much worse in the central Florida area that's gaining in population and gaining in votes for the Republican Party, areas like Volusia County, those kinds of areas. And I think John Bel Edwards would have been able to capitalize on that. And I think that he would have won a lot of states in an area that I could honestly see going either way. And this is a very, very cursed election if we're looking at it. But, it's an election that's really not going to ever happen. But if it did happen, what would it look like? If you do run a Southern Democrat versus, a more Rockefeller Republican, I guess you could say. I could have done an election with someone like Charlie Baker or Phil Scott, but honestly, Phil Scott is closer to a Democratic Party than John Bel Edwards is at this point. I think you could easily make that argument. But overall, I think that if we're looking at a map of John Bel Edwards versus Larry Hogan, John Bel Edwards would have gone in a landslide, I would say, 356 electoral votes to Larry Hogan's 182. I think that's in part because, the Trump wing of the party would abandon Larry Hogan, and I think that the Democratic Party would abandon John Bel Edwards less. They would still abandon him, but I think that it matters more in states like New York and California, but, they're already safe Democratic states, that I don't think it would matter as much, but I think that he would have more appeal to rural areas in the Midwest, to rural areas in the South, and that would have given him a comfortable victory. But, let me know what you think down in the comments. Would John Bel Edwards have actually won this election, or would Larry Hogan have won this election? I really, struggled thinking about who would actually win this election, but I came to terms with the fact that John Bel Edwards would probably end up winning. So, thank you all for watching this video. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But again, guys, thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you guys later.